Well, good morning, Columbia CSL. Thank you. Thank you for being here and for expanding the acceptance of your divinely human magnificence. Today we continue the theme Reaching Higher by exploring the idea of planting ourselves in the universe rather than the world of condition, as we take a closer look at how we stay in or bail from the conscious holy presence. Through casting our net into the natural creative nature of the cosmos, that intelligent cause back of all, rather than leaning into the business of the world of effect, we drop into the infinite life force that fascinated and inspired our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes. In this mindful spiritual work, we see, hopefully with some amusement along the way and often some bear cuddles from time to time, the movement from cause to effect and from effect back into causation, whether it is a smooth or bumpy pathway. For any of us, this idea of turning away from the effect, the conditions of our lives, stripping them with the ultimate power they have over us to identify our selfhood, can be frightening enough, let alone experiencing the void, silence, the emptiness, to sit with and face with intention to embrace our innate true nature and its unlimited capacity. But ours is to learn to let go, step aside, and mindfully release what no longer serves us, listening to, trusting, and committing to live from the deeper core values of our own soul, in concert with the highest vision we can hold for ourselves and a world that can work for all. Now, to do this, we must expand through demonstration or demonstrating our consciousness of acceptance and compassion. This is why we plant ourselves firmly in the universe, because here its natural laws of creation and beingness reflect the spiritual truth of our being, as there is only one. So I'd like to share a story that illustrates fierce commitment to staying in the conscious holy presence. During a day-long celebration that was had to acknowledge when the first Christian missionaries came to the region of Zaire, an old man got up to speak, saying that his death was imminent, and if he wasn't allowed to speak now, the information he carried might never be known. He began by saying, when the Christian missionaries first came to the region of Zaire, his people did not trust them. They were unusual and had a very strange message. So the tribal leaders decided to test the missionaries by slowly poisoning them to death. Over the months and years, the tribesmen witnessed the fashion in which death and grief was handled by the missionary families. The old man concluded by saying, "It was as we watched how they died that we knew we wanted to live like Christians," meaning living with the acceptance of God's presence in their hearts to nourish and guide them on their path. A radical kind of acceptance that led them through their painful, strange deaths to maintain their vigilant commitment to stay and preach their strange message. So the cost of staying in the presence of the holy, our personal passionate conviction, living from our hearts, being freely expressed, is sometimes tantamount to a death. The cost of bailing from the holy presence is far, far greater, however. The reason is that when we bail, we choose a path without the winds of adversity, and therefore we are not as naturally likely to grow a deeply extended root system. So to illustrate that, I want to share a story of when, I think it was in 2000, my dear friend, Reverend Marilyn Knipp, and I went on a road trip in her truck to visit her mom in Tucson, Arizona. We went from Vancouver down and back in 10 days. It was a whirlwind. And during that time, we went to visit a structure, you may have been there, called Biosphere 2, a man-made living habitat experiment. Now, during the tour, one of the guides explained that there was an oversight by the designers of the project. They failed to create wind within the structure. And because there was no wind to blow the trees back and forth, a problem was created. And the problem was that the trees would grow to a certain height and then topple over from their own weight. The lack of wind resulted in the trees not having a deeply extended root system to sustain their growth. It's only when we stay in the presence of the holy in our lives that we ensure our continued growth in becoming the wholeness of the nature of God without toppling over. Bear time, toppling over. You know, when I plant myself in the universe, I am communing with the energetic integrity of the energy of universal love. And in that love, declaring to deepen my root system. D.H. Lawrence described our Western culture as being like a great uprooted tree with its roots in the air. He's saying that we are perishing for lack of fulfillment of our greater needs. We are cut off from the great sources of our inward nourishment and renewal. Now, I believe we come alive as we rediscover the truth of our goodness and our natural connectedness to all of life. Our greater needs are met in relating lovingly with each other, relating with full presence to each moment, relating to the beauty and the pain that is within and around us. Lawrence concludes his thoughts by saying, we must plant ourselves again in the universe, right in the greater and fuller expression of life as it is showing up, accepting it. So what good is done when we are choosing to live spiritually and learn this spiritual way in life by just theoretically understanding the principles? Dr. Holmes says we only know what we can demonstrate and prove, because that way we experience the principles working through us, so that we affirm and declare, remember that life is doing nothing to us, that we are saying yes and allowing life to work through us. And in this application, we experience the principle of unity. I want to give you an example. So unity is one principle of life. And so when I turn away from emotional upset, when I don't want to look at the reality of those homeless folks in the Okanagan in Kelowna, we have a street. Everyone has a street or several where those that are temporarily without a home gather. And when I don't want to look at the reality of those homeless folks in pain, I am putting myself in the position of separation. And what I'm really doing is affirming that there is no relationship between us. And I take no responsibility for my brother and my sister, or the aspects operating within me which were causal to my needing to create that distance. It drops me smack dab into the holy presence in the holy moment, without regard to time, space, or conditions, when I remember the principle of unity. One of our highly regarded teachers in the movement that I had the great pleasure to know and do know, Dr. Carol Carnes, writes a blog post. And I wanted to extract some of what she wrote this week. The mind knows the truth when it's spoken. Now, Emerson wrote that in The Oversoul. He also wrote that words of spiritual beauty or references to our immortality, our source, our perfect universe, take us out of time and space and its constraints, and it places us in the awareness of the eternal. Emerson said that even in times of sickness or great challenge, which exist only in the field of time, a word of truth will lift us into peace. He also said that our senses have so overpowered us that we have come to believe that time is an eternal truth, an eternal reality, when it's really merely a local experience, convenient, but not eternal. So what has our sense of time, he says, to do with awakening to our spiritual magnificence? Absolutely everything. Einstein spoke to this, of its relativity. He said 2 minutes sitting on a hot stove seems like forever, but 2 hours in the arms of your beloved, no time at all. Love is part of the transcendence of time. When we are engaged in something we love, there is no sense of time passing. It is now and now and now, and we want more of now, right? Completely smack dab in the energy, in the conscious holy presence. But when we are waiting for someone or something to happen, it seems to drag on forever. So now we can see what Emerson meant when he said the soul knows nothing of time. When we are in a state of love, we are operating from the soul level. We have planted ourselves in the universe, in this dimension of anything is possible. This is when great ideas come to us. Our hands seem to be able to create art or music or literature without struggling. That is when the magic happens. Thank you, Dr. Carol Carnes. The quest for perfection is based in the assumption that we must change ourselves to belong to this unity, this oneness, this great love, this cosmos. But it has been said that true freedom is being without any anxiety about imperfection. So this means accepting our human existence and all of life as it is, remembering that imperfection is not our personal problem. It is a natural part of existing. So think of that again. Imperfection is not our personal problem. It's a natural part of existing, because we're always expanding and growing beyond what has gone before, upon including what has gone before into a greater expression. And as we are moving and being called by that divine urge inside of us to be all that we are and discover that and experience it and embrace it by demonstrating it, we also have an awareness of what has gone before is smaller than what we are now in the energy of experiencing. And sometimes we label it as imperfect, a natural part of existing. You know, when Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he became enlightened because he found the great way, for his heart was open and free. His amazing insight was that all suffering or dissatisfaction arises from a mistaken understanding that we are a separate and distinct self. Now, our culture, with its emphasis on self-reliance and independence, has given us the idea of needing to fend for ourselves, and often the feelings of need will therefore create a sense of shame. We interpret everything we think and feel, and everything that happens to us as in some way belonging to or caused by a self. When we take life personally by I-ing and my-ing, the universal sense that something is wrong solidifies into something is wrong with me. Now, the way out of the mind cage begins with accepting absolutely everything about ourselves and our lives by embracing with wakefulness and care caring of our moment-to-moment experience without trying to control, judge, or pull away. When we can see our prison, we can also see our potential. Sometimes people refer to the cage, as being in a trance of unworthiness. If we are caught in that trance, we do not clearly recognize what is happening inside of us, nor do we feel kind. You know, the ego can convert anything to its own use, even spirituality. But as we lean into the experience of the moment, you know, that holy presence, releasing our stories and gently holding our pain or desire, radical acceptance and compassion begin to unfold. The two parts of genuine acceptance, seeing clearly and holding our experience with compassion, are as independent as the two wings of a great bird, but together they enable us to fly and be free. So bringing that sense of unworthy self, separate self, into a spiritual life is planting ourselves in the universe. Clearly, clear seeing honestly accepts an experience. And compassion honors our experience, making our experiences wholehearted and complete. When we clearly recognize what is happening inside of us and regard what we feel with an open and kind and loving heart, this is radical acceptance. But if we are holding back from any part of our experience, if our heart shuts out any part of who we are and what we feel, we are fueling the fears and feelings of separation that sustain the trance of unworthiness. Now, radical acceptance directly dismantles the very foundation of this trance. So I'm going to ask you a question. What would it be like if you could accept life, accept this moment exactly as it is? No matter what movie might be playing in your head right now, the intention to accept your experience will begin to deepen your attention and soften your heart. I have another question. So can you trust that suffering can be a gateway to compassion and undo our deepest conditioning to run away from pain? Remember the principle of wholeness. Everything is one thing happening at one time. Nothing is outside of the holy presence. So whatever we are experiencing is the holy presence present as and in and through the experience. Learning to hold our own sorrows as we give up old roles of being the adversary, the judge, the victim, will help us to feel the power of someone else's caring as well, which often leads to that oh so needed hug we have received on occasion, in which we can just melt down and cry. So I want to propose something to you today. Whenever you feel pain within yourself, your mind, your body, your heart, say, I care about this pain. And whatever suffering may come up that I'm experiencing, say, I care about this suffering. Question. Is there right now a heaviness anywhere in your body? If there is, will you please put your hand on that part and say to yourself, I care about this pain. I care about this suffering. And just take a breath. Feeling compassion for ourselves in no way releases us from responsibility for our actions. It just releases us from self-judgment and labeling, which prevents us from responding to our life with clarity and balance. In the times when prayer has become impossible, it is because we are too caught up in the story of unworthiness to receive love. When we feel held by a caring presence, by something larger than our small, frightened self in that moment, we begin to find room in our own heart for the fragments of our life, and for the lives of others, and for the suffering that might have seemed too much, awakening us to the sweetness of compassion. The source of longing is God's gift of itself to the world. Our longing is for love itself, and when we reach more fully into it, the more deeply we open to our yearning for the beloved, for the holy presence. And the act of self-communion is then experienced. The compassionate beloved we are reaching out for is our own awakened being. Now, as our heart transforms our suffering into compassion, we experience being both the holder of our own sorrows and the vulnerable one who is being held. And we, in that instant, immediately transcend all sense of separation. Both the holder and the held dissolve into loving awareness. Our mind cage, or our imprisoned splendor, is the result of our story of a suffering self. When we tenderly hold our anger, we cut through the oppressive burden or feeling of having a personal flaw, and we begin to see its universal nature and plant ourselves in the universe. I love the stories of Buddha. Here's another one for you. Buddha's loyal attendant, Ananda, was always looking for any harm that might come to his teacher. And he wanted to report with dismay this one day that the evil one had again returned. Now, instead of ignoring Mara, as the story names the evil one, or driving him away, the Buddha would calmly acknowledge his presence, saying, "I see you, Mara. It would be my honor if you would stay and I could serve you tea." In seeing Mara, the Buddha remained free and undisturbed, no matter how long Mara stayed. Seeing what is, we can hold what is seen with kindness. Each time we recognize and embrace our hurts, our fears, or that of others, we express such a wakefulness of heart. For us, more times than we can count or remember, we exercise our habit of being a fair weather friend to ourselves, pushing away or ignoring whatever darkness we can. The journey is about learning to make friends with ourselves, our Mara, our life, at the most profound level possible. We befriend ourselves when, rather than resisting our experience, we open our hearts and willingly invite Mara to tea. So the process of inviting Mara to tea is really threefold. Firstly, it's making the inquiry, gentle, kindly, as we would show a troubled friend. Secondly, to name or speak our awareness to promote its dissipation. And thirdly, to practice the art of saying yes, to give ourselves permission to be, feel, experience right where we are, helps us to move us through the dark cloud of no. But, some people say, well, what happens when we say yes and our experience unfolds into something undesirable? Well, by agreeing with what shows up, we offer it the space to express, dissipate, and what? Be on its way, move through us. Dr. Ernest Holmes says that although our body is not who we are, and that the material world has no power over us, it is the evidence of spirit becoming form, the undifferentiated invisible becoming the differentiated visible. So the ground of radical acceptance is found when we pause long enough that we can open to the awareness of the deep interconnection of our mind and our body. After all, the sensations of the body are ground zero the place where we directly experience the entire play of life. It is when the roots of our reactivity are stored, in knowing that we can free ourselves at the ground level from the reactivity or subconscious patterning that perpetuates that suffering. In metaphysics, we comment on the fact that anything material that we can see, touch, taste, hear, or smell is just an effect and not an entity unto itself. It therefore holds no creative power of its own. And at the same time, we live so much in our heads, we are somewhat mesmerized about our ideas about the world, and we miss out on much of our direct sensory experience of it. We say that God, we cannot know God, but we can have a direct experience of God. So even if we are aware of a strong breeze or the sound of rain on the roof, a fragrance in the air, the hammering and sawing we heard during the end of the meditation outside Io's window, we rarely remain with it long enough to inhabit it fully. Unless physical sensations are extreme in the area of pain or pleasure, sensations can be elusive and difficult to recognize. It is for this reason that many of us find it hard to believe, if not remember, the fact that the body and mind are interconnected. The ground of radical acceptance is asking us to go deeper than the idea of what is that is going on in our body into the sensation. So imagine just for a moment an area of your body where you have felt acute pain or chronic discomfort, or just moments ago where you put your hand. So what would happen if you didn't label the pain? You would move into just the sensation of it and begin to notice its subtle changes, coming to realize that it is ever changing into another expression of itself. In other words, the creative process of life is going on, and that there is absolutely nothing solid or static about the experience. When we come to realize that our pain, suffering, or pleasure does not hold still for even a moment, this can at first seem uncomfortable, even frightening. Perhaps this is cause to our resistance to change, generally speaking, why we don't trust spirit, because it asks us to radically accept change and constant movement that is natural and yet feels like it's out of our control. At each time we let go of our story, we realize that there is no ground to stand on, no position that directs us, no way to hide or avoid what is arising. Sensations are always changing and moving. If we habitually interrupt and constrict their natural process of unfolding and transformation by resisting them, or trying to hold on to them by tightening against them in our body, or telling ourselves other stories, it's like damming up or diverting the course of a river. Pain has a unique quality. The stronger it is, the less aware we are of the rest of the world. For the moment, we can believe something is wrong. Our world shrinks, and we lose ourselves in the effort to combat our emotional or physical pain. It is easy to let sensations flow when they are present and pleasant. But when they are not, we pull away. Seeing this and learning how to meet the discomfort with radical acceptance and compassion is one of the most challenging but liberating practices. Like the first Christian missionaries in Zaire, they were unmoved by the presence of imminent death and continued their purpose on earth to give, to love, to support life in realizing its magnificent self by affirming the existence of the holy presence. So I invite you to declare with me today that you plant yourself in the universe, ever deepening and expanding your root system. You know, there isn't a piece of life we were born to miss. For the infinite creativity to demonstrate it and the capacity to experience it lies within our reach. So I trust that today you've taken yet another step in the celebration of your own life as a life of God by accepting the unbound freedom that lies within to capture the life's essence, its soul, its spirit, absolutely all of it. And so it is.